Tornadoes are, honestly, one of nature's most violent and unpredictable creations. They're these rotating columns of air that stretch all the way from the dark clouds of a thunderstorm down to the earth below. These powerful funnels can have wind speeds that, wow, exceed 300 miles per hour, capable of tearing buildings from their foundations and tossing vehicles through the air like toys. It's really a raw display of the planet's atmospheric power, a reminder that, in the grand scheme of things, we are small in the face of such immense forces. For centuries, people have watched the skies with a mixture of fear and wonder, trying to understand these terrifying storms that can just appear with little warning and vanish just as quickly, leaving a trail of complete devastation in their wake. There's, a deep, primal fascination we have with extreme weather. It's this spectacle of pure power, an event that commands our absolute attention. We're drawn to the drama of a massive storm, the dark swirling clouds, and the sheer force of the wind and rain. But this fascination isn't just about the danger. It's about witnessing something that is far beyond our control. It connects us to the natural world in a very direct and humbling way. For weather enthusiasts and scientists alike, every major storm is a puzzle to be solved, a chance to learn more about the complex systems that govern our planet's climate and hopefully use that knowledge to protect lives in the future. While every tornado is a significant event for those who experience it, some storms really stand out in history. They become legendary not just for their power, but for the scale of their impact on human lives. These are the storms that reshape communities and change the way we think about weather safety forever. They become benchmarks against which all other storms are measured. The story of the most devastating tornado ever recorded isn't just a tale of wind and destruction. It's a human story of loss, survival, and the incredible strength of communities faced with an unimaginable disaster. This event stands apart, a somber chapter in the history of meteorology. This particular tornado is special because it defied all the norms of its time. It traveled farther, lasted longer, and moved faster than any other tornado on record. In an era before advanced warning systems, before Doppler radar, and before the widespread understanding of tornadic supercells, it struck with shocking brutality. It crossed 3 states, leaving an unbroken path of destruction for over 200 miles. It remains the deadliest single tornado in United States history, a tragic event that serves as a powerful lesson about the importance of weather awareness, forecasting, and preparedness. Its legacy is etched into the very landscape and memory of the regions it touched. The most devastating tornado in history is known as the Tri-State Tornado. This catastrophic event occurred on Wednesday, March 18, 1925. It began its long and violent journey in the early afternoon, a time when people were at work, children were in school, and life was just proceeding as normal. The sky began to darken ominously, but in 1925, the science of storm prediction was really in its infancy. There were no tornado watches or warnings issued by a national weather service. People had only their own eyes and instincts to rely on, and what they were about to witness was something no one had ever seen before, or has seen since. The tornado's reign of terror began in the rural countryside of southeastern Missouri. It first touched down around 1 o'clock in the afternoon near the town of Ellington. From there, it embarked on a relentless northeasterly track that would take it across the entire southern portion of Illinois and into southwestern Indiana. For 3.5 hours, the monstrous funnel cloud stayed on the ground, carving a continuous path of destruction. This was not a series of smaller tornadoes from the same storm. It was one single massive vortex that maintained its power and form over an incredible distance, a feat that, honestly, remains unparalleled in the official records of tornadic events. The path it took through these 3 states, Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana, is what gives the tornado its name. The storm system that spawned this monster was part of a larger outbreak that produced other significant tornadoes across the Midwest and the South, but the Tri-State Tornado was really in a class of its own. It moved at an average forward speed of nearly 62 miles per hour, with some estimates putting its ground speed at over 70 miles per hour at times. This incredible speed meant that communities had almost no time to react. The roar of the storm was upon them in an instant, leaving little chance for people to seek shelter. The lack of warning was a critical factor in the high number of casualties. The word tornado wasn't even used in official weather forecasts at the time, partly out of fear it would cause public panic. Many people who saw the approaching storm cloud didn't recognize it as a tornado. It was so large and its base so close to the ground that it was often described as a rolling fog or a boiling mass of dark clouds, not a classic funnel shape. This strange appearance, combined with its rapid speed, meant that by the time people understood the true danger they were in, it was often far too late to escape its wrath. The weather conditions on March 18, 1925 were, honestly, a textbook recipe for a catastrophic tornado outbreak. A powerful low-pressure system was moving across the central United States, drawing warm, moist air northward from the Gulf of Mexico. At the same time, a strong cold front was advancing from the west, bringing with it much colder, drier air. The collision of these two vastly different air masses created an extremely unstable atmosphere. This instability is the fuel for severe thunderstorms. The warm, humid air at the surface wanted to rise, and the cold air aloft allowed it to do so with explosive force. This clash of air masses alone can create strong storms, but another key ingredient was present: wind shear. This means that the wind speed and direction change significantly with height in the atmosphere. At the surface, winds were blowing from the south, but higher up, a powerful jet stream was roaring from the southwest at incredible speeds. This difference in wind created a horizontal rolling motion in the atmosphere. As the warm air rose into the storm, this horizontal roll was tilted into a vertical position, creating the rotating updraft that is the engine of a supercell thunderstorm, the most powerful type of thunderstorm on Earth. Once the supercell thunderstorm formed, it became a self-sustaining storm machine. The rotating updraft, called a mesocyclone, acted like a spinning top, allowing the storm to remain organized and powerful for a very long time. This particular supercell was exceptionally efficient, converting the atmospheric instability into a violent tornado that stayed on the ground for a record-breaking duration. The storm's rapid forward movement, propelled by the strong upper-level winds, contributed to the immense scale of the disaster, as it covered a huge amount of territory in a relatively short period of time. It was a perfect and perfectly deadly combination of atmospheric factors. It is believed that the tornado that formed was what meteorologists now call a long-track tornado, and likely a violent one, rating at the very top of the damage scale. The sheer size of the funnel, estimated to be up to a mile wide at times, meant it could engulf entire towns at once. The storm system was so powerful that it maintained its structure and intensity across hundreds of miles of varying terrain, from the hills of Missouri to the flatlands of Illinois and into Indiana. The conditions were not just right for a tornado. They were right for a historic, once-in-a-generation weather event that would leave a permanent scar on the American landscape. The journey of the tri-state tornado was, honestly, a relentless march of obliteration. After forming in Missouri, it quickly intensified, completely destroying the town of Annapolis. It moved on, crossing the Mississippi River into southern Illinois, where it would cause the most catastrophic damage of its entire lifespan. The tornado tore through the mining towns of Gorham, Murfreesboro, and DeSoto with unimaginable fury. In Gorham, not a single structure was left standing. The town was wiped off the map in a matter of minutes. The storm's power was so immense that it scoured the ground, stripping away grass and topsoil in some areas. In Murfreesboro, Illinois, the devastation reached its peak. The tornado struck the town's schools while classes were in session, leading to a tragic loss of young lives. The Longfellow School, a sturdy two-story brick building, was flattened, and many other schools were heavily damaged or destroyed. Homes, businesses, and entire neighborhoods were turned into a chaotic wasteland of splintered wood, twisted metal, and personal belongings scattered for miles. The sheer scale of the destruction was overwhelming. Survivors described a scene that looked like a battlefield, with the air thick with dust and the cries of the injured. Over 200 people died in Murfreesboro alone, the highest death toll in a single community from a tornado in United States history. From Murfreesboro, the tornado continued its northeasterly rampage, devastating the town of DeSoto and striking the railroad town of West Frankfort. In West Frankfort, a large portion of the town's mining population was underground in the coal mines when the storm hit. While the miners themselves were safe, they emerged from the darkness to find that their homes, and in some cases, their entire families, were gone. The tornado's path was so wide and the destruction so complete that it created a distinct, visible scar across the landscape that would remain for years. It was a clear and terrifying line between normal life and total ruin. After leaving Illinois, the still powerful tornado crossed the Wabash River into Indiana. It slammed into the towns of Griffin, Owensville, and Princeton, causing further death and destruction, before finally dissipating near Petersburg. By the time the storm lifted back into the clouds, it had been on the ground for 219 miles. It had destroyed more than 15,000 homes and left a legacy of ruin across 3 states. The size of the tornado was staggering, with a path of damage that was, on average, 3/4 of a mile wide. It was a monster in every sense of the word. A storm that set a benchmark for devastation that has, thankfully, never been surpassed. In the midst of the chaos and destruction, there were honestly just incredible stories of survival that highlight both the randomness of the storm and the resilience of the human spirit. In Murfreesboro, a baby was reportedly found alive and unharmed in a field, having been carried a great distance from its destroyed home. In other accounts, entire families survived by huddling in their cellars as their houses were ripped apart above them. They would emerge from the darkness to find their world completely gone, the only recognizable landmark being the foundation of their own home. These moments of survival were glimmers of hope in an otherwise dark and desperate situation. One powerful survivor account comes from a student who was in a schoolhouse in DeSoto, Illinois. He recalled the sky turning a sickening greenish-black color just before the storm hit. The teacher, sensing the immediate danger, yelled for the children to get down and hide under their desks. Seconds later, the building exploded around them. The student remembered being thrown through the air and landing in a pile of debris, miraculously alive but surrounded by the wreckage of his school and the cries of his classmates. These personal stories transform the historical data into a human tragedy, reminding us of the real people who lived through this terrifying ordeal. The stories from first responders and volunteers are just as powerful. Doctors and nurses from surrounding areas rushed to the devastated towns, setting up makeshift hospitals in any building that was still partially standing. They worked for days without rest, treating horrific injuries with limited supplies. One doctor described performing surgery on a kitchen table by the light of a kerosene lamp, using whatever tools he could find. The sense of community was immediate and profound. People who had lost everything themselves worked tirelessly to dig through the rubble, searching for neighbors and friends, driven by a desperate hope to find more survivors. The tornado's bizarre behavior also left behind strange and unforgettable memories. People reported finding personal items from their homes miles away, such as photographs, letters, and even clothing. One of the most famous stories is of a canceled check from a bank in Murfreesboro being found in a field over 200 miles away in Indiana, carried there by the storm's powerful updrafts. These small personal artifacts served as eerie messengers of the storm's incredible power and reach. They were tangible proof of how a single weather event could connect distant communities through shared loss and a common, terrifying experience. In the immediate aftermath of the tri-state tornado, the affected areas resembled a war zone. The silence that followed the storm's roar was soon replaced by the sounds of grief and the desperate search for survivors. There was no organized federal disaster response like we have today. The initial rescue and relief efforts were carried out by the survivors themselves, joined by volunteers from neighboring towns who arrived with food, water, and medical supplies. The Red Cross and other charitable organizations quickly mobilized, but the scale of the disaster was almost too much to comprehend. The immediate priorities were finding the injured, providing medical care, and setting up temporary shelters for the thousands left homeless. The days that followed were grim. Morgues were overwhelmed, and public buildings were repurposed to hold the bodies of the victims so that families could begin the heartbreaking process of identification. The sheer number of fatalities, totaling 695 people, was staggering. Entire families were wiped out. In some small communities, the loss was so great that the social fabric was torn apart. The task of clearing the debris was monumental. Without modern heavy machinery, the work was done by hand, by teams of volunteers and laborers working with shovels, axes, and horse-drawn wagons. It was slow, grueling work, carried out under the shadow of immense collective grief. Despite the despair, the spirit of resilience began to shine through. The nation was shocked by the news and images coming from the devastated region, and donations began to pour in from across the country. This outpouring of support provided not just financial aid, but also a crucial morale boost to the broken communities. people began the long and difficult process of rebuilding their lives and their towns. It was a testament to human determination. Neighbors helped neighbors clear their land and rebuild their homes, often using salvaged materials from the wreckage. The disaster forged an unbreakable bond among the survivors. The landscape itself was forever changed. Thousands of trees were stripped bare or uprooted, leaving behind a barren, splintered terrain. Farmland was littered with debris, making it difficult to plant crops. Some of the smaller, hardest-hit communities were never able to fully recover. Towns like Gorham, Illinois were essentially erased and never rebuilt to their former size. The tornado left not just physical scars on the land, but deep emotional scars on the generations of people who lived through it. The memory of March 18, 1925, became a permanent part of the region's identity, a story passed down through families as a cautionary tale of nature's power. The human cost of the tri-state tornado was immense and heartbreaking. With a final official death toll of 695 people, it remains the deadliest single tornado in the history of the United States. Illinois suffered the most, with 613 fatalities, the majority of whom were in the towns of Murfreesboro, West Frankfort, and DeSoto. Missouri reported 13 deaths, and Indiana saw 69 people lose their lives. Beyond the fatalities, more than 2,000 people were injured, many of them severely. These injuries ranged from broken bones and deep cuts to life-altering disabilities, creating a long-term public health crisis for the affected communities. The emotional and psychological toll on the survivors was immeasurable and lasted for decades. Many children were orphaned, and countless individuals lost their entire families in the storm. The trauma of witnessing such devastation, of losing loved ones and homes, left deep psychological scars. For years after the event, people in the region would feel a sense of panic whenever the sky turned dark or the wind began to howl. This collective trauma became woven into the fabric of the community's culture, a shared experience of loss that bonded the survivors together but also haunted them for the rest of their lives. The economic impact was just as staggering for its time. The tornado caused an estimated $16.5 million in property damage in 1925. When adjusted for inflation, that figure equates to several billion dollars in today's money. Over 15,000 homes were damaged or completely destroyed, leaving thousands of families homeless and with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Farms, businesses, schools, and critical infrastructure like railroads and power lines were obliterated. In an era before federal disaster relief programs and widespread insurance coverage, the financial ruin was absolute for many families and business owners. The destruction of the coal mines in southern Illinois had a particularly severe impact on the regional economy. Mining was the primary industry in many of the towns along the tornado's path. With the mines heavily damaged and the workforce decimated, the economic engine of the region ground to a halt. This compounded the suffering of the communities, making the process of recovery even more difficult. The tri-state tornado was not just a natural disaster, it was an economic catastrophe that set the region back for years, highlighting the vulnerability of communities that depend heavily on a single industry. The sheer scale of the tri-state tornado disaster served as a brutal wake-up call for the U.S. Weather Bureau, the predecessor to the National Weather Service. Before 1925, the Bureau had a policy of not using the word tornado in public forecasts. They feared the word itself would cause unnecessary panic, and that forecasting specific tornadoes was impossible, leading to a loss of public trust if a forecast was wrong. The immense loss of life on March 18, 1925, made it painfully clear that this policy was costing lives. The public needed to be warned of potential threats, even if the science was not yet perfect. This tragedy slowly but surely began to shift the focus of meteorology from simply observing the weather to actively forecasting severe events to save lives. While it took many more years and other tornado disasters to fully implement, the seeds of a modern warning system were planted in the rubble of Murfreesboro and DeSoto. Scientists began to study tornadic storms with a new sense of urgency. They analyzed the weather data from that fateful day, looking for clues and patterns that could help them identify the conditions that produce such violent, long-track tornadoes. This event underscored the critical need for a centralized system to issue warnings. The disaster also highlighted the importance of public education and preparedness. In 1925, most people had no idea what to do in a tornado. They didn't know the warning signs, such as a dark greenish sky or a loud roar like a freight train. They didn't know that the safest place to be was in a cellar or an interior room on the lowest floor. The high death toll in schools and homes showed that building construction and safety procedures were inadequate. The lessons learned from the tri-state tornado eventually led to the development of public safety campaigns, tornado drills in schools, and better building codes in tornado-prone areas. Looking back, the tri-state tornado represents a critical turning point. It marked the end of an era of ignorance and the beginning of a scientific quest to understand and predict these deadly storms. The development of radar during World War II and later Doppler radar gave meteorologists the tools they needed to see inside a storm and detect rotation, allowing for the life-saving tornado warnings we rely on today. Every time a tornado watch or warning is issued, it is part of a legacy that can be traced back to the hard lessons learned from the unparalleled tragedy of March 18, 1925. Our relationship with powerful weather is, and always will be, one of respect and caution. The story of the tri-state tornado is a humbling reminder that despite all our technology and scientific progress, we are still subject to the immense power of nature. We cannot control the weather and we cannot stop a tornado. What we can do is understand it, prepare for it, and heed the warnings it gives us. Living in areas prone to severe weather requires a constant state of awareness. It means knowing the risks, having a plan, and taking every warning seriously. Complacency is the greatest danger when facing a threat like a tornado. Today, we are armed with knowledge and tools that were unimaginable in 1925. Satellites monitor the atmosphere from above, Doppler radar networks scan the skies for rotation, and supercomputers run complex models to predict where severe storms will form. We have the Storm Prediction Center, which issues watches, and local National Weather Service offices that issue specific warnings for our communities. We receive these warnings instantly on our phones, televisions, and weather radios. This incredible system is the direct legacy of past tragedies, built to ensure that no community is ever caught by surprise as they were in 1925. Staying safe in the future depends on using these tools wisely. The first step is to have multiple ways to receive warnings because one method might fail. The second is to have a designated safe place in your home, a basement, storm cellar, or an interior windowless room on the lowest level. Practicing your family's safety plan is just as important as having one. When a warning is issued, you may only have minutes to act, and those minutes are precious. Taking immediate shelter is the single most important action you can take to protect yourself and your loved ones from the destructive power of a tornado. The sky will always hold the potential for beauty and for danger. The tri-state tornado was a singular event, a perfect storm of devastating ingredients that created a monster. While we hope to never see its like again, we must always be prepared for the possibility. By respecting the power of the atmosphere, by investing in science and technology, and by fostering a culture of preparedness in our communities, we honor the memory of the 695 people who lost their lives on that terrible day. We live with the sky, and our survival depends on understanding its language and heeding its warnings.